welcome to Stitch and Bear Time. My name is Leslie Winchester, and little bear is, well, let me show you what he's doing right now. There he is. Hi, little bear. Yeah, so he's busy playing. We are going to get started on Santa's face today and continue with our letters to Santa Bucilla Stocking. So let's get started. So when I got started with Santa's face, I decided to do embroidery work before cutting out the face itself. I do that every once in a while when the piece just feels like it might be hard to hold as I'm stitching, which is what I did with this. So I cut it out last. And I meant to show you guys how to do the satin stitch, which is what I did for the cheeks and the eyes, and I spaced. I got into my stitching mode and I totally forgot, but I did do it later on. So I will show you how to do a satin stitch later on in the video today. Once I was finished there, I went ahead and appliqued it on to my stocking, which made it look very weird because all I have on my stocking right now is a face. I also had to stuff it as well to give it some dimension. At the time, I did not realize I forgot to outline my eyeballs and the upper parts of the cheeks, but I fixed that later on and I'll go over that when I get there. Next, I ended up working on the hat, and this required me to put some sequins and beads on. Notice that my beads are red. This is one of the few colors I've seen so far where you're not using a white bead, or clear bead I should say, you're using a red bead. It's with red sequins. And then I appliqued it on and I stuffed it, and I put the little pom-pom at the end of the hat on there as well. I did that first actually. And then there was the base for Santa's face. Next I moved on to his body, and I had to do some sequins along the edges there, which was very confusing because in the instructions it did not tell me to do that. I was very confused, but I saw these dots there that looked like sequins are supposed to go there. So I just kind of followed my gut instinct and I went ahead and did it. And I figured worst comes to worst, I have to cut them out because they don't belong there and they're in the way, which I don't think I need to do that. I moved on to appliquing the body on and stuffing it. And I will say that I wish I would have stuffed it more. I wish I would have made him fatter, because as you'll see later on, when I put my finger into his body, I feel like my fingerprint will kind of stay in there, like it could have been stuffed more. But it's okay. You live and you learn. Next time I'll know. Just stuff until you can't. Basically stuff it as much as you possibly can. It just looks way better. Then I moved on to the trim of his suit, and this required a lot of sequin work. I did cut it out before I put the sequin on. You will hear some people say that they always sequin everything first and then they cut it out. My issue with that is when I try to cut things out with my scissors, I just feel like the sequin gets in the way of me cutting my pieces out. So I do it the way that the instructions state too. After that, I appliqued my trim onto my Santa, and soon after that I put on his belt. And I actually really liked this moment because it started to feel like things are coming together and it didn't look like such random pieces are put on anymore. Things are starting to actually make sense. Let's get started on the beard. And as you can see, I've already cut out the piece for the beard, and I am now going to start working on the embroidery part of this, where I'm creating Santa's mouth. So what I'm going to show you now is called a satin stitch. And they use this stitch as a filler. And I did it earlier in my stocking and I forgot to show you how to do it. So as you see here, I did the satin stitch on the cheeks and the eyes, and it just fills it in with that color. So in order to do satin stitch, you want to start from the bottom, and I already put my needle there, and you're gonna pull through, okay, and then you're gonna go all the way to the top. So let me just do that, make sure I'm making it straight. Like that. And then you're just gonna repeat that. So I am going to, again, start from the bottom. And the satin stitch for me is still a little bit new. It's one of the stitches that's very hard for me to get used to, because I feel like I'm not always happy with it when I do it. So I take my time. And I'm sure the more I do this, the better I'll get. Again, another favorite part of putting the stocking together is when I got the beard on, because I got to stuff it and make him look all cute, and it just brought all those random pieces I was putting on him together. So I really liked this part of doing the stocking. After that, I got into my stitching mode again. And I forgot to take pictures of what I was doing and do videos. So I basically went from just doing the beard to doing the trim of the hat, the eyebrows, and his mustache, all basically in one go. And it turned out so cute. I didn't stuff the trim of his hat because it didn't tell me to, but looking at it, I kind of wish I did. It's okay. Again, live and learn. Next time I know I can kind of improvise some things a little bit, but for whatever reason, it's just a little bit more concave than I would have liked. So moving on, I put on the nose of Santa, and it didn't tell me to stuff it, but I did because I just wanted it to be nice and fat and round. And then I moved on to the belt buckle. I moved on to finishing up the trim on Santa's suit. After that, I had to start putting together the mittens, and I got to stuff these. And this is when things got a little difficult for me, because I wanted to make sure that that list that went on Santa was going to match up perfectly with how I wanted it to be positioned, which meant I needed the arms and the mittens to be positioned right. Putting together his arm was actually a lot of fun. As you can see, there were a lot of sequins I had to put on to make it really sparkly. The white cuff, I was a little confused by. The instructions told me to sequence it, but that white cuff didn't have any little dots on it on where the sequins are supposed to go. So I just kind of made it up, and the picture doesn't even have that on there. So I stuffed it pretty good, attached the shoulder. That was a little difficult because I made it so fluffy, that shoulder, but I had to applicate the top of that shoulder on and leave the rest of it unattached to give that 3D look. Once that was finished, I moved on to the list. And as you can see here, I had cut it out to try and position it to figure out how should everything work together with the arm and that mitten to make sure it was going to fit nicely. Alright, let's learn the back stitch. This is one of the simpler stitches in my opinion. It's one of the first ones I learned when I started cross stitching, because you use it a lot for outlining when you cross stitch. So we're going to do that now. I've done a couple already. Where we're going to put our needle is not where my last stitch was, but actually a little further out. So let me do that right now. Try and keep it as close on that line as possible. I'm gonna pull it through, and you're really trying your best to make each stitch the same length. I'm not always the best at that, I'll admit. And now I'm going to put my needle back where my stitch was before. So let me do that now. Sorry if I get off camera a little bit. Looks like that. And now I'm gonna pull it through. Like so. I'm really happy with that stitch. Take your time when you're stitching and embroidering, by the way, just because you can get knots really easy. Appliquing, all that stuff, knots show up pretty easy when it comes to this stuff, so just take your time. And there you go. So right now I am finishing up cutting out the letter, and when I cut felt out, I am pretty sloppy with it at first because I've learned how to get the last bit of the stamping off, so I don't worry about making it so perfect anymore. I like my lines to be straight. The stamping I just don't worry about as much. So you can see here on the edge I got a little bit of that stamp left. And this is my method of getting that off. There's two different things you can do when you have stamping still there. My preferred method is to take my tiny, tiny scissors that I use for embroidery work to cut threads and such. And I go against the edge with these, and I just kind of slowly and carefully cut off that felt. And then, as you can see, I cut that part off. And I mean, it's just fuzz. Look at that. It's just the tiniest bit of fuzz, but it's enough to get the stamp off. And then I'll take some piece of felt that I cut off that I'm not using, that was just, you know, extra. I just kind of rub it off on here. And you can see what I had just cut off. And then I just continue with that all the way around my felt pieces, so that by the end of it, you are not going to see really almost any of the old felt that was there before. The old felt stamping, excuse me, that was there before. As you can see, I also finished the back stitch. I feel like I noticed the stockings that still have the stamping on the edges, where it's just not a very clean cut. It is rather noticeable. I then went on to continue with my embroidery in a spot that they don't typically ask you to do. I had to do some embroidery right where I appliqued 2 pieces of felt, and it was the outline stitch, which took me a couple times to start it. But it actually turned out really good. It looked really nice. And then I had to start attaching my list to Santa's hands. And I started with 1 mitten at a time. And I really took my time with this part. I wanted to make sure that it was going to fit nicely and look the way I wanted it to. And there is Santa. He looks so good. There are a few things I learned while doing this. One of it is the stuffing, and I always heard that you want to stuff as much as you can, but I always worried about the felt warping on the sides, which I'm not as worried about anymore, because I'm realizing you want to stuff as much as you can. Because if you look at his belly, when I put my thumb in there, my thumbprint kind of stays, which means it could have been stuffed more. You can really see it there. So I wish I made him fatter. But if I push on his hat, his beard, his arm, I stuffed a lot. And it looks way better. It just gives it good dimension. So next time I'm going to stuff more the way I did with the last few pieces. Also, I learned about when I put on the sequins to tie a knot after each one. I didn't do that with the background sequins, and if I turn this around, I'm going to show you the back of my stocking. I decided I'll show you. You can see that I didn't knot at all, and because it's warping a little bit from the stuffing, they're getting a bit loose. I don't know if I'm going to fix it. We'll see how it goes, but now I know. Tie a knot after each sequin, and then it's a lot more stable. One more thing that happened during this project so far is I forgot to outline his eyes and above his cheek. And when I realized I did that, I almost freaked out. But then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go through the stuffing. I know it says not to, but I'm just going to do it anyway because I need to outline his eyes and his cheek. And I actually like the fact that I did that. It gave his face a little more dimension that it wouldn't have had otherwise. So I might remember this and possibly choose to do that on purpose in the future when it comes to outlining the face. I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, he looks really good. You see that 3 dimension there, and he got some sequins underneath the letter in case it flips up a little bit. It looks good. Okay. For our next video, we are going to work on the bottom portion of the stocking, and then after that, our very last video will be of me putting this whole thing together with the backing and the lining. We're getting there, guys. It's getting there. Okay, well, this has been Stitch and Bear time, and we will see you next time. Bye!